And I predict, as I've alluded to earlier and talked with you about, George, is that the home is becoming the center of the universe. And we can thank the U.S. government for the internet. In the 90s, I remember being a big follower of Faith Popcorn. She's a futurist who wrote, I think, a couple of books, but one that I read talked a lot about cocooning and how people were making the home the center of their life. And back then, okay, because this is before the internet really caught on, if you will, uh, the main point of, or the main reason for cocooning was this: people weren't going to movie theaters because they had big home theater systems and could watch high fidelity movies at home. Okay, that was cocooning back then. Now it's been taken many steps further than that, and just that concept is it's really kind of interesting because office properties, people are being pushed out of them, gatherings of every sort. I just wouldn't want to be in the business of owning real estate that is for a commercial purpose. But I love housing. I think it's all about housing, housing, housing. And homeowners just got another bailout. I just got this one that now you can take a year-long break from your mortgage payments, I guess. I don't know how the banks are going to survive with this idea, but they'll just get a bailout, I guess.
Back
It's
to the
it's
Fed
like
balance
trickle,
sheet.
trickle, trickle, just pump the money in the system, right, to prop it up. What do you think? Crazy.
This really, so this gets really technical. I don't know how far you want to dive into this, but basically, this could potentially not create inflation, consumer price inflation, because so the banks have a bank account with the Federal Reserve.
Hmm.
It's a reserve account. So the Fed, that's why they mostly do business with the primary dealers, because it doesn't create a deposit in the real economy. All they do is, let's say you're a primary dealer, you've got $1 billion in your reserve account. All they do is just type in digits to a computer, and now you have 2 billion in your reserve account. But in the real economy, it hasn't created any more deposits, right? So let's just say, excuse me, that the Fed comes in and bails out all the bank, or pays for this year long mortgage. So they would just add reserves to the bank's reserve account that they have held with the Fed. And the only way that that would get out into the real economy is if those banks were to take those additional funds and buy financial assets or create more loans. So if there's no demand for loans because we're in a depression,
Well, there's tons at the moment. There's tons of demand for loans because the
well,
rates went down, and the mortgage brokers, they're literally turning business away. It's crazy, but we're only at the beginning of this. So go ahead.
yeah. So, well, if that does play out,
Yeah.
nothing I'm saying are certainties. I'm not even
Yeah.
making predictions. I'm just
Yeah.
saying this could play out this way. And then if that goes down as far as the new loan creation, and you have more people paying off loans, decreasing the money supply, and you could see the opposite. It could be very counterintuitive. And
Hmm.
then the only thing else they could do to create those deposits would be to buy financial assets, which they may or may not do, depending on what's happening. Maybe they don't want to catch a falling knife. But then behind that, you've got all these four-letter programs that they've come up with that allows those banks to buy those assets and the Fed to basically pay them for that service. And then it goes onto the Fed's balance sheet. So that could increase the money supply in those deposits. There's just so many cross currents. It
I
gets,
know. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
But
sure
I
I'm
tell you,
confused.
the moral hazard here, and I just did a couple of shows on the return policy for real estate, which is an option for people, and that's why I think it's a very safe investment because you always have these backdoor options, the return policy for real estate. But it's a lot of moral hazard. That's the problem when the government starts, and the government and the Fed, I'm sort of speaking of those two as if they're one, they're not. But when they start intervening in everything, all the concept of whose obligation is anything, it just gets all funky, and it's hard to know. The morality of everything disappears, doesn't it?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. And that what we're seeing is going to be this massive bailout of corporations and most likely the consumer. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I am saying it's just most likely going to happen.
Yeah.
So then how do you pull that back, right? So let's just say that everyone gets a year-long holiday from paying their mortgage. Well, now we're at month 11 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think everyone's going to be like, yeah, let me go back to paying my mortgage. I can't wait.
Yeah, right.
They're going to go to their politician and they're going to say that we need this extended. And by the way, if we extend it another year, why can't we extend it 5 years? Why can't we do MMT? We're not seeing inflation, so why can't we just print the money? It would be just like Section 8 housing. And the Section 8 vouchers. Yeah. Just think if we just said, okay, enough is enough. We're not going to do that anymore. And no, because people are so
there'd be riots in the streets. Nobody would tolerate it.
You change the way, or Social Security. I think that's probably even better, right? What happens if you just mention increasing the Social Security age and people freak out? Why? Because they've built their entire lives around this set of rules. Well, if we build our lives now around the bailouts and MMT or universal basic income, try reeling that one back. If people get $1,000 a month for the next year, you think
can't
that's
take it?
Hey, no way.
Hey, you, me, and Milton Friedman agree. There's no such thing as a temporary government program, right?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said that this is a prelude, or call it an excuse, for universal basic income, which was probably coming anyway, and or a national housing assistance program like Section 8. And you just mentioned Section 8, so I thought I'd bring that up.
Well, what do you think about national rent control? Do you think this is going to potentially bring that on?
But I don't know that there'd be a lot of need for it, because I don't know that there's going to be that much rent inflation in the near term. There's just, if you have high unemployment, granted, people be getting their checks. I was kind of thinking about this yesterday morning from a landlord's perspective. If we have universal basic income, temporary or permanent, or a national housing program like a Section 8, as a landlord, it doesn't give your tenant the opportunity to lie to you anymore. That's kind of nice, because they can't say, well, I was laid off, or and have these excuses to not pay the rent. I'm like, hey, I know what government program you're on. Pay me. Or the government's just going to pay you directly, like Section 8. So,
and you can take it. You can take it a lot of steps further if you start thinking about government-backed digital currency, because then that tenant wouldn't have the ability to not pay you, because the money that was going to them would be specifically earmarked digitally for you.
Right. Yeah. So it might make landlording more convenient in some ways, but look at folks, everything's up for grabs right now. It's just there's a lot of unknowns. But one thing for certain, a crisis brings the future closer to us. All the stuff that was probably coming in 5 years, 10 years is going to happen sooner.